Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we will be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Dav Chaf Hey Amud Aleph. We pick up on Chaf Dalet Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tzitzis. We pick up in Siman Yud Gimel in the middle of Sif Beis, in the middle of the words of the Ramah. So here in Siman Yud Gimel we are discussing the halachos of Tzitzis, specifically how they pertain to tzitzis on Shabbos. Now, in yesterday's shir, we spoke about the halacha of how it is usher to wear tzitzis that are puzzle on Shabbos. I shouldn't say it that way. Not that it's usher to wear tzitzis that are puzzle, but if you're wearing tzitzis that are puzzle on Shabbos, you cannot go out to the Rishos Harabim. If you're wearing a beged of Dalet Kanfos and you have tzitzis on them that are puzzle for any reason, let's say some strings have been torn off in a way that renders them puzzle, then while you are out in the Rishos Harabim, or if you go out from the Rishos HaYachid to the Rishos Harabim, or from the Rishos Harabim to a Rishos HaYachid, or if you walk Dalet Amis in Rishos Harabim, you're going to be over on the Isser of Hoitzah, what we colloquially call carrying on Shabbos. Why is that? Because you're wearing a beged that has tzitzis on them, but those tzitzis strings are not effective because they're puzzle. Since they're not effective, they're not considered to be an adornment of the beged, they're not considered to be bottled to the beged, and therefore it's a masui, it's a burden that you're carrying around that is somehow connected to your beged. And the example that I gave yesterday was, it would be similar to going outside with a keychain clamped or hooked onto your belt loop. That's not considered a beged. It's not bottled to the beged, so it's hoitzah. You're carrying a keychain outside on Shabbos. So too, the puzzle of tzitzis strings that are on your, it's not really the puzzle of tzitzis strings, the way the Mishnah Berurah says, but all of the tzitzis strings that they may be kosher. For example, you have a tal's cotton, and on each corner you have tzitzits. Let's say on one corner the tzitzits are puzzle. The other three corners, technically those tzitzits are kosher. But why are you going out with them on Shabbos? They're not being effective, they're not pattering the beged, and they're still chashuv, they still have value, because you're going to leave them attached to the beged, you're just going to fix the other corner. So therefore they're considered a masui, and you're not allowed to go out with that to the Rishos Harabim. If you did, the Mechaber told us it would be an Issa Daraisa. You did it b'shoigig, you would be chayiv to bring a carbon chatas. Now the Ramah, and it's 3 lines from the bottom on Chaf Dalet Amud Beis, the Ramah brings up a very interesting point. Now that we learnt the halacha that if your tzitzits are puzzle, you have a problem going out to the Rishos Harabim with those tzitzis, maybe the halacha should be that on Shabbos, before you go out to the Rishos Harabim, you should be mechuyev to be boidik your tzitzis. After all, if every time you go out to the Rishos Harabim, you're risking being over an Issa Daraisa of Hoitzah, if your tzitzis are puzzle, so maybe you should have to be boidik your tzitzis before you go out the door. Says the Ramah, no. 3 lines from the bottom towards the beginning of the line. Umukminon letalis achaskase. We leave the talis in its established chazaka, shehu mitzuyitz kehilchasai, and we assume that it is properly affixed with tzitzits, and that the tzitzits are kosher. Ve'ein tzarich levadkai kaidem sheyetze bai, and therefore you're not mechuyev to check the tzitzits before you go out with them. And he brings this down from a Chuvas Harosh and from a Chuvas Haramban, a Kolboy, a Rambam. So the Ramah is telling us that you don't have to go out and check your tzitzits. Why? Because there's a chazaka. There's a chazaka that the tzitzits are kosher. Why is there a chazaka that the tzitzits are kosher? So, assumedly, what's at work over here is, we learned earlier in Siman Ches, I believe it was Sif Tes, Siman Ches, Sif Tes, on Yod Dalet Amud Aleph, we learned the halacha Kaidem sheyavarech, before you make a bracha on your tzitzis, ya'ayin b'chutei hatzitziyos, you have to check your tzitzis, imheim kisherim, to check that they're kosher, kedei shelo yavarech levatala, so that you should not risk making a bracha levatala. So we learned earlier in Siman Ches the halacha that every day you're supposed to be baidik your tzitzis. Before you put on your talis, you're supposed to be baidik your tzitzis. We learned the halacha. Many people have the minig like I do. I'm baidik my tzitzis when I take my talis off. After davening, I take my talis off. Before I fold it up and put it away, I'm baidik the tzitzis. Now I put it into the talis particle, and I can assume that tomorrow morning they're kosher. Why shouldn't they be? So too over here, the Ramah is telling us, assumedly, Shabbos morning, you took out your talis, you were baidik your talis, and your tzitzis were kosher. Now, if you want to go out to the Rishus HaRabim, you don't have to go check them again. There's a chazaka. If they were kosher in the morning, there's no reason to assume that they're not kosher now. Therefore, the Ramah establishes this halacha, even though there's a risk of an issa daraisa, you go out with tzitzis, you go out with a talis, if they're puzzle, then some of the tzitzit strings will be considered a masui, and you're being over on hoitzah. Since you checked your tzitzis, there's a chazaka that they're kosher, and you're not mechuyev to check the tzitzis every time before you go out. So says the Ramah. Now, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Zayin. Kaidem sheyetze boy. You're not mechuyev to check the tzitzis before you go out with them. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, like I just said. Kevan shebedakoi baboiker. Since you checked the tzitzis in the morning, be'es shahaya mavarech al halavisha. When you took out the talis in the morning, before you made the bracha on the talis, you checked them. V'nimtzu shleimim, and at that point the tzitzis were intact and they were kosher. Su ein ragali pasek bizman muat kazeh. There's no reason for us to assume that they might have become ripped in the short amount of time from this morning when you put your talis on until now when you want to go home and you want to walk in the street. To teach the words accurately, Su ein ragil li pasek. It would not be normal for the tzitzis to rip bizman muat kazeh over such a short duration of time. Afilu siru ben time, and this is the halacha even if you took your talis off. So let's say you went to shul, you checked your tzitzis, you made a bracha on the talis, you put it on. Then you took off the talis after davening because you didn't want to get any herring on your talis by the kiddush. Then a half hour later, you want to go home and you don't have an erev, so you're gonna put on your talis and you're gonna wear your talis home. Do you have to check it before you go out the door? No. You made a bracha before davening, even though you took off the talis in the meantime. Maybe you have to make another bracha. You're Mesiach Das, you have to make another bracha, but you don't have to check the talis. There's no reason to assume that from the morning before davening until now, after the kiddush, they got ripped. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, Umuchach mizeh. However, it is very clear from this discussion that b'Shabbos gam kein tzarich livdai katzitzitz. What comes out very clear from this Ramah is that you have to check the tzitzits of your talis on Shabbos the same way you have to check them during the week, right? Because that's what the Ramah is saying. The Ramah is saying, why don't you have to check your tzitzits before you go out to Rishus HaRabim? Because certainly you checked them in the morning before you made the bracha. So it's very clear, it says to Mishnah Berurah, that the Ramah holds that the same way you have to check the tzitzits of your talis on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you also have to check them on Shabbos. Now, why is that a chiddush? We'll see. And the Bach writes this beferish. He says you should know the same way we learned the halacha in Siman Ches Sif Tes that every day you have to check your tzitzits. It applies equally on Shabbos. On Shabbos you also have to check your tzitzits. But says the Chavetz Chaim, v'ha'olam ein nizharin bazeh. But we find that the world is not nizhar in this. They check their tzitzits the rest of the week, but they're not noig to check their tzitzits on Shabbos. Va'ayin bebi'ar halacha. So the Chavetz Chaim sends us to the bi'ar halacha for a discussion of this. Now, before we go into the bi'ar halacha, I'm going to see the bi'ar halacha inside. But before we go into the bi'ar halacha, let's remember, why do we check our tzitzis? There are two primary reasons why we check our tzitzis before we put them on in the morning. The Mechaber, back in Siman Siftes, the Mechaber told us, Koydem sheyavarech, before you make the bracha on the talis, ya'ayin b'chutei hatzitzis imhem ksherim, check the strings of the tzitzits to make sure that they're kosher. Why? Kedei shelo yavarech levatala, so that you shouldn't risk making a bracha levatala. We know that one of the Aseres HaDibros, Laisis Hashem Hashav, you don't say Hashem's name in vain. The Isser of bracha levatala is very, very chamor, and we always treat it very stringently, and that's why we have the klal suffik brachas lekula. Whenever we have a suffix, whether or not we have to make a bracha, generally speaking, the rule is we go lekula, which means we do not make the bracha. Why? Because we never risk a bracha levatala. So you're taking a talis, you want to make a bracha, you have to make sure that the tzitzis are kosher. If you put it on and the tzitzis are puzzle, you aren't mekayim the mitzvah. You made a brachas ha-mitzvahs, but you aren't mekayim the mitzvah, so you made a bracha levatala. So says the Mechaber, in order to protect against chas v'chalila making a bracha levatala, before you make the bracha, you have to check the tzitzis. So that's reason number one. Now, back in Siman Ches, in Siftes, in Mishnah Berurah Ois Kot L'Chaf Beis, the Mishnah Berurah discussed another issue. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber is telling us, why do you have to check the tzitzits? To protect against making a bracha levatala. Wait a second, says the Chavetz Chaim. There's another very basic reason why you should have to check the tzitzits. Let's say you don't check the tzitzits, and let's say it turns out that the tzitzits are puzzle. Well, then you just put on a beged of daled kanfos, and it's not properly affixed with tzitzits. So you're being mevatel a mitzvah aseh. You're wearing a beged that's chayiv in tzitzits, and it doesn't have tzitzits. That's it, it's a daraisa. You're being mevatel a mitzvah aseh, a daraisa. So asks the Chavetz Chaim, why is the Mechaber telling me that I have to check the tzitzits to protect against the bracha levatala? How about checking the tzitzits to protect against bittul aseh daraisa? Explains the Chavetz Chaim that it's not so simple. The Chavetz Chaim says, as far as the bittul mitzvah aseh midaraisa, over there, the Chavetz Chaim says, we could rely on the chazakah that we just mentioned over here in Siman Yud Gimel. We just said that, generally speaking, there's a chazakah that if you know that a talis has kosher tzitzits on it, so unless something happened to the tzitzits that makes you think that the talis may have become puzzle, I mean, if you were walking in shul and you felt your tzitzits get snagged on a chair or somebody stepped on them, so then maybe there's reason to go ahead and suspect the tzitzits may have torn, and you have to check it. But if nothing happened, so the Chavetz Chaim says, really, there's a chazakah. If we know that the talis was kosher, the talis continues to be kosher. And the Chavetz Chaim says, according to the Mechaber, it seems that we are comfortable relying on that chazakah as far as the risk of putting on a beged of daled kanfos without tzitzits, and maybe running the risk of being mevatel mitzvah aseh midaraisa. For that, we could rely on the chazakah. But for the Isser Chamor of bracha levatala, of Laisis Hashem Hashav, for that, we don't rely on the chazakah. And that's why the reason that the Mechaber picks on why we have to check the tzitzits is the risk of the bracha levatala, because that's very chamor. Now, the Mishnah Berurah back over there says that the Achronim don't really like this cheshbon, and the Achronim say that we always have to check the tzitzits, not only because of the risk of bracha levatala, but also because of the shaila of bittul mitzvah aseh daraisa. Where does it make a nafkamina? So the Mishnah Berurah back over there said the nafkamina would be, what if you're wearing multiple garments that have four corners? A very simple case in point. Somebody puts on a talis cotton in the morning, and now he goes to shul, and he puts on a talis gadol. He's going to make a bracha on the talis gadol, but he didn't make a bracha on the talis cotton. Does he have to check the tzitzits of the talis cotton? The Mishnah Berurah says, according to the Mechaber, he does not. Why? Because he's going to make a bracha on the talis gadol. And the talis gadol, he's going to check. If the tzitzis on the talis gadol are okay, there's no risk of a bracha of HaTorah. He's making a bracha on the talis gadol. Now he's trying to pater the talis cotton with the same bracha. But since the talis gadol he knows is kosher, no matter what, it's not a bracha of HaTorah. So the only reason to check the tzitzis on the talis cotton is because of the risk of the bittul mitzaseh of tzitzis. Says the Chavetz Chaim, according to the Mechaber, not a problem. The Mechaber is not afraid of the risk of the bittul mitzaseh because we take the talis cotton and shtel zachar chazaka and we assume that it's still kosher. According to the Achronim, who say that no, we also have to check the tzitzis because of the risk of bittul mitzaseh, so you have to check the tzitzis on the talis cotton and on the talis gadol. That's what we learned in Siman Ches. What's the takeaway from Siman Ches? Takeaway is, that's negaya to us here in Siman Yud Gimel, there are always two reasons why you have to check your tzitzis. One reason is the risk of bracha levatala. The other reason is the risk of bittul mitzaseh. Those are the reasons why we check our tzitzis. Now, over here in Siman Yud Gimel, the Ramah introduced to us another possible reason why you would want to check your tzitzis on Shabbos, and that is the Isser Hoitzah. You want to make sure you're not being over on Hoitzah. Says the Ramah, for that, you don't have to check your tzitzis on Shabbos. Why? Because we shtal zachar chazaka, and we assume you checked your tzitzis in the morning, right? Like Siman Ches, you have to check your tzitzis anyway, because of bracha levatala, and because of bittul mitzaseh. So you checked your tzitzis in the morning when you put them on Shabbos morning. You don't have to check them now for because of Haitzah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but what's apparent from this Ramah is that the same way you have to check your tzitzis during the week in the morning when you put them on, because of bracha levatala and because of bittul mitzaseh, those reasons apply on Shabbos as well. And that's why the Ramah assumes that Shabbos morning you're going to check your tzitzis. And says the Mishnah Berurah, yet, v'ha'olam ein nizharin bazeh. And he wants to know why. The two reasons of bracha levatala and bittul mitzaseh still seem to apply. So based on that preface, on that lengthy preface, let's see the Biur Halacha on Chav Daled Amud Beis, Dibur HaMaskil Kodim Sheyetze. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Mashik Asavnu, what we wrote, L'inyan B'dika B'Shabbos, when it comes to checking the tzitzis on Shabbos, where it's apparent from the Ramah that the Ramah assumes that you must check your tzitzis Shabbos morning, and yet the Welt is not noig to. V'ulai tam ha'minhag, says the Chavetz Chaim, possibly a justification for the minhag ha'olam not to check the tzitzis Shabbos morning is, the lama yoyel ha'bedika. What point is there in checking the talis? What do you mean, what point is there? The point is to make sure you're not making a bracha levatala, and to make sure that you're not wearing a beged of dal kanfas without tzitzis. What do you mean, what point is there? Oh, so explains the Biur Halacha, and again, this needs a preface. We are going to learn shortly that there is an astonishing difference in the mitzvah of tzitzis on Shabbos and during the week. Let's realize, what is the mitzvah of tzitzis? The mitzvah of tzitzis is a mitzvah saseh. There is no lav connected to tzitzis. The Torah does not say anywhere, loy silbash beged dalit kanfais b'li tzitzis. There's no iser lav to wear a four-cornered garment without tzitzis. The mitzvah is a mitzvah saseh. If you're going to wear a beged of dalit kanfais, you have to put tzitzis on it. Now, are you allowed to put tzitzis on a beged on Shabbos? Well, to put tzitzis on a beged on Shabbos involves making knots. Not only does it involve making knots, it involves making a kesher shel kayama. You're going to make double knots. And you very clearly intend for them to stay there. Well, that's one of the lamites malachas. Kosher. You're not allowed to tie. You're also not allowed to be masaked a keli. And it could be that putting tzitzits on a garment is tikkun kli, because you're not allowed to wear it. Now you are allowed to wear it. So you're not allowed to put tzitzits on a garment on Shabbos. Now wait a second. If the Torah Dirshu says that you're not allowed to put tzitzits on a beged on Shabbos, How could the Torah Kedosha give you a mitzvah saseh and tell you that on Shabbos you have to put tzitzis on a four-cornered garment? Now you'll tell me, okay, so fine, you're not allowed to put tzitzis on Shabbos, so you're not allowed to wear the beged on Shabbos. But the problem is that the Torah never gave an Isser Lav to wear such a beged. If the Torah would have given an Isser Lav, so then I would say, okay, you can't put the tzitzis on Shabbos, so the Isser Lav is b'mkayma omedes. There's no way for you to discharge the Isser Lav, so you're not allowed to wear the beged. But there is no Isser Lav. There's only a mitzvah saseh. There's a mitzvah saseh, put tzitzis on a beged of Dal Kanfas. But on Shabbos, you're not allowed to put tzitzis on a beged of Dal Kanfas. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Aruch HaShulchan, there is no bittul asay da'araisa of wearing a beged of Dalit Kanfas on Shabbos without tzitzis. On Sunday, if you put on a four-cornered garment without tzitzis, you're being mavatal mitzvah asay da'araisa. It's an isser asay. On Shabbos, if you put on a beged with Dalit Kanfas without tzitzis, there's no isser da'araisa. There's no isser da'araisa. Because on Shabbos, there's no mitzvah asay to put tzitzis on a beged. Because you can't. It's aser. Mitam hilchos Shabbos. So there's no bittul asay da'araisa to wear a beged of Dalit Kanfas without tzitzis on Shabbos. With that in mind, there's possibly one reason why you don't have to check your tzitzis on Shabbos morning. Because if the reason to check the tzitzis on Shabbos morning is to protect against wearing a beged of Dalit Kanfas without tzitzis, that doesn't apply on Shabbos. On Shabbos, it's not a daraisa to wear a beged of Dalit Kanfas without tzitzis. Now, it appears that it still is a darabanan, but it's not a daraisa. So, okay, maybe that's a reason why you don't have to check your tzitzis. Says the Biur Halacha inside. V'ulai tama minigu mishum delama yoyel abedika. What point is there in checking the tzitzis? Da'afilu lo yimtzeim karoi. Because let's say you check your tzitzis and you find out that they're puzzle. Yiyamut lil b'Shabbos b'beis hakneses. Guess what? If you check the tzitzis of your talis on Shabbos morning and you find out that they're puzzle, we are hopefully going to learn soon. I see this is taking a lot longer than I thought, but hopefully we're going to learn the halacha soon in the very next sif, that the Ramah says, if your tzitzits turn out to be puzzle on Shabbos, guess what? You're allowed to put on the talis without a bracha, and you're allowed to sit in shul wearing that talis, a talis of Dalit Kanfas, without tzitzits. You're allowed to sit in shul and wear that talis. Can't make a bracha on it, because you're not being mekayim the mitzvah, but you're allowed to wear it. Why? Because of kavod habrius. Because it's a bezoyin to sit in shul without a talis. What do you mean? Bittul asay daraisa? No, there is no bittul asay daraisa. Because there is no mitzvah asay daraisa to put tzitzits on a beged of Dalit Kanfas on Shabbos. So that's why the Biur Halacha says, hold it. Maybe one reason why the olam firtzach not to check tzitzits on Shabbos morning is, what's the point? Even if they're puzzle, you're still allowed to wear it. So you don't have to check it. Kepsak HaRamah b'Sif Gimel, like we're going to see the Ramah hopefully shortly in Sif Gimel. However, says the Biur Halacha, Zeh lo yuteretz ela l'Magen Avram. This explanation of why the Welt doesn't check tzitzit Shabbos morning only works according to the Magen Avram, who says that the primary reason to check the tzitzis is because of the bittul mitzvah asay daraisa, that you shouldn't wear a beged of Dalit Kanfas without tzitzis. So, according to the Magen Avram, so okay, we understand. We have a justification for the minig. There's no need to check your tzitzis Shabbos morning because you're allowed to wear the beged of Dalit Kanfas without kosher and tzitzis anyway. Aval, however, continues to be our halacha. Lefi masha kasav ataz, according to what the Taz writes, the tam abadikahu b'shem chaymer loisisa bebracha levatala. How about the other need to check your tzitzis to protect against chas v'chalila making a bracha levatala? The Taz in Simches tells us that's the primary reason. If that's the primary reason, so that applies equally on Shabbos. You're going to make a bracha, how could you risk making that bracha without checking the tzitzis first? Im kain yivdoik, for that reason, you should certainly check your tzitzis. V'im yimtza sheim pesulim, and if then you find out that the tzitzis are pasul, yilbash, you could still put them on, like the Ramah, but v'lo yavarich, but don't make a bracha. So there is a point in checking the tzitzis Shabbos morning. The point is, even though you're still allowed to wear the beged, even if the tzitzis are pasul, but at least you'll know not to make a bracha. So again, we're back to the kasha. Why does the Welt Tvertzach not to check the tzitzis Shabbos morning? Then the Berurah says it gets even more complicated. Even according to the Magen Avram, who says that there's no need, that the ikar reason to check the tzitzis is to make sure that you don't put on a beged of Daled Kanfus without tzitzis. So he said, according to him, we don't have to check Shabbos morning, because the Ramah says you're allowed to wear the talis even without the kosher tzitzis. Says the Berurah, not really. The Ramah that says at Siv Gimel that you're allowed to wear a talis without kosher tzitzis on Shabbos, that's only because of kavod abrius when you're in shul. In shul, we don't want you to be embarrassed. So since there's no bittul asay daraisa, because with daraisa there's no mitzvah to put tzitzis on your beged on Shabbos, so okay, because of kavod abrius, we'll let you wear the talis without tzitzis. But certainly, if there is no problem of kavod abrius, then midrabanan you're not allowed to wear that talis. So says the Berurah, avalim loivesh talis bebeisai. Let's say you live in an area where there's no eruv, and what you do is you get up in the morning, Shabbos morning, you put on your talis in your house, and you walk to shul wearing your talis, right? So now, when you put on the talis in your house, is there an issue of kavod abrius? No. So you have no heter to wear that talis if it doesn't have kosher tzitzis. So even according to the Magen Avram, you have to check your tzitzis before you put them on in your house. So the Berurah is back to not understanding this minig, why people have this minig not to check their tzitzis on Shabbos. Therefore, concludes the Berurah, and he says, the proper thing to do is, Shebiyoyim Erev Shabbos Kodesh, on Erev Shabbos, Yivdoi Katalis Be'ez Hanachosoi Bahatik Shaloi. Before you take your Shabbos talis and get it ready for Shabbos, check your tzitzits on Erev Shabbos. Va'oz lo yitztarich livdoik b'Shabbos. Once you checked it on Erev Shabbos, and then you put it away, you don't have to check it on Shabbos, because there's no reason to assume that it got ripped. We have the chazaka. So again, to wrap this all up, every day of the week, you have to check your talis. Why do you have to check your talis? So one reason is we want to make sure you don't run the risk of making a bracha of HaTorah. Another reason is we don't want to run the risk of wearing a beged of Daled Kanfus that's not properly affixed with tzitzits. I think most people are careful about checking their tzitzits during the week. I hope so anyway. It's a beferish halacha. There's no heter not to do it. You have to check the tzitzits of your talis on a daily basis. Talis cotton, maybe you could get away with if you're making the bracha on the talis gadol. So we had that shita back in Siman Ches that you don't have to check then the tzitzits of the talis cotton on a regular basis. But definitely, at some point, you can't wear the same talis cotton for 20 years and never be biting the tzitzits. On Shabbos, the Welt seems to fear not to check them. Now, we went through this whole Berurah, and it's very clear from the Ramah that there is a need to check your tzitzits, on Shabbos, just like there is during the week. You have to protect against bracha l'vatala the same way you have to the whole week. And you also have to check against wearing a beged of Daled Kanfus without tzitzits, even though that's a lot more kal on Shabbos than it is during the week. During the week, it would be a bittul mitzvah say daraisa. On Shabbos, it's not. It's only a darabanan. But still in all, it's a D'Rabbanan. So you have to check it for that reason also on Shabbos. Now, one of the reasons why people don't check their tzitzis on Shabbos, if you ask most people, why don't you check your tzitzis? Well, you're not allowed to make a knot. You're not allowed to make a kesher anyway. So why am I checking it? Okay, so what I do is, Motzei Shabbos, after Ma'ariv, I take my talis and I fold up my talis. Where's my Shabbos talis going to go after I fold it up? It's going to go back into my Shabbos talis zekel. And I'm not touching my Shabbos talis, and I'm not taking it out of the zekel from Motzei Shabbos until next Shabbos. So if I check the tzitzis of my Shabbos talis on Motzei Shabbos before I put it back into my talis zekel, then I don't have to check it next Shabbos morning. Because there's no reason that I don't have a chazaka. If it was kosher the previous Motzei Shabbos, it's still kosher then. I think that is probably the best route for most people to go. Check the tzitzis of your Shabbos talis on Motzei Shabbos when you fold up your talis and put it away, and then you don't have to check them Shabbos morning. And that finally concludes Sif Beis. We still have a little more time, so let's go ahead with Sif Gimel. And Sif Gimel, we're going to see many of the principles that we just discussed, so hopefully it'll go quickly. I don't have to repeat everything. Sif Gimel, bottom line, Chav Daled Amud Beis, says the Mechaber. Im noidaloi b'Shabbos kishehu b'karmelis sha'talis sha'olav pasel. Let's say somebody is walking outside in the street, and he's wearing his talis, he's coming home from shul, and he's walking in a karmelis. And the truth is, most of us, depending on where we live, when we walk home from shul on Shabbos, and I'm assuming there's no Erev, you're walking in a karmelis. That's what you're walking in. You're walking in a karmelis. It's a rishus d'Rabbanan where there is no iser haitzah, there is no iser of halicha daled amis in a karmelis midaraisa. It's an iser d'Rabbanan. So you're wearing a talis, and suddenly you find out, you look down at the corner, or somebody steps on your tzitzis strings and they rip, and you realize that your tzitzis are puzzle. So, okay, your tzitzis are puzzle in a karmelis. That means you're carrying in a karmelis, right? That's an issa d'Rabbanan. You're carrying in a karmelis. So, are you mechuyev to take the talis off and put it down and leave it there? Or something? I mean, how could you walk with it? It's an issa d'Rabbanan. Says the Mechaber, Lo yasirenu me'elav, you're not mechuyev to take it off until you get home. Why? The God will cover abrius. Because it would be a bizayon if you have to take your talis off, and that's covered abrius. And the isser that we're dealing with here is only an isser d'Rabbanan. It's not haitzah d'araisa. If you were in a rishus harabim, it would be haitzah d'araisa. But you're not in a rishus harabim. You're in a karmelis. It's only haitzah d'Rabbanan. Haitzah d'Rabbanan is nidchem mipnei kavod abrius, like we see very often. An issa d'Rabbanan is pushed aside mishum kavod abrius. So, kavod abrius, you're allowed to wear the talis, and you're allowed to carry those other tzitzis strings, even though they're a masui. Doesn't matter. Kavod abrius. Now, how about the issa of tzitzis? Wait a second. You're wearing a talis, a beged of daled kanfas, and it's puzzle. Your tzitzis are ripped. So that goes back to what we just discussed, that since it's Shabbos, there's no bittul asay daraisa. It's only a d'Rabbanan. And again, a d'Rabbanan is nidchem mipnei kavod abrius. Let's see the Mishnah inside. Ois katleches. B'Shabbos, you realized on Shabbos, when you're in the karmelis, that your tzitzis are puzzle. V'im yada me esmoil. How about if you checked your talis, your Shabbos talis, like I said, you checked it the week before on Motzei Shabbos, and you saw then that it was puzzle. V'shachach lahatel by tzitzis, and you forgot to fix it. So now, you're kind of a pesheya over here. In the Mechaber's case, you thought that everything was fine and dandy, and then while you're walking in the karmelis, somebody stepped on your talis and ripped your tzitzis strings. But that's not what happened here. Here you knew before Shabbos that your talis was puzzle. You forgot. You put it on. And then while you're walking in the karmelis, you realized. Are you still protected? Could you still wear it because of kavod abrius, even though you're a pesheya? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Nira gamkein deloi kansinon lei. The Torah cares so much about your kavod abrius that we don't kansin you, we don't penalize you. We don't make you take off the talis. Veraya bil kaman b'simin shin nun heisiv gimel b'haga. We learned this together. Heicha d'shachachu v'loy ervu ayin sham. What the Mishnah Berurah is referring to is a halacha that we learned together, which is if you have a beis hakisei in a chutzner in such a way that you can't access the beis hakisei without an erev, and you forgot to make an erev. So maybe now you can't use the beis hakisei. No, the halacha is they covered abrius, since it's only an issa d'Rabbanan, you're allowed to use the beis hakisei. So you see, even though this fellow was a pesheya, he was negligent, he forgot to make an erev, still, covered abrius, he's allowed to use the beis hakisei. So too over here, this fellow was negligent. He knew before Shabbos that his talus was puzzle. He forgot to take care of it. Maybe we should make him take off his talus outside in the street? No, the answer is we don't, because of covered abrius. Ice cut and test, kishu b'karmelis. What's a karmelis? Hu makom shesham ein iser tilpel rak b'derabanan. A karmelis is a rishus d'Rabbanan. So the iser to carry the tzitzis strings is only an iser d'Rabbanan. Well, a kach ein tzarech lahasir. And that's why he doesn't have to take off the talus, because it's only an iser d'Rabbanan. The covered abrius daiche iser d'Rabbanan, because covered abrius is daiche an iser d'Rabbanan. V'af agav tzitzis mitzasei daraisa. Now wait a second. He's wearing a beged of dal kanfus without tzitzis, and tzitzis is a mitzasei daraisa. Udaraisa loydachin may covered abrius, and we're not daiche a mitzasei daraisa because of covered abrius. That's a Gemara in Brachas Yutesa based on a pasuk in Mishlei. Pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Chaf Aleph, pasuk Lamid. Ein chachma, ve'ein tfuna, ve'ein eitza leneged Hashem. The Torah Dirshu gives you an issa daraisa. You're not doicha an issa daraisa when they cover abrius. Mikam makom shari, it's still mutter. Why? Because of what we said. The loy amra Torah loy silbash beged b'loy tzitzits. There is no Isser Lav to wear a beged of Dalam Kanfus without tzitzits. Rak mitzvah say lahatal by tzitzits. There's only a requirement of a mitzvah say to put tzitzits on the beged of Dalam Kanfus. But there's no Isser Lav. The Kevan she'en yachal lahatal by tzitzits b'Shabbos, and since it's impossible to put tzitzits on a beged of Dalam Kanfus on Shabbos, because it's an Isser of Lam Tes Malachas, an Isser of Kosher, ein over mitzvah say. So therefore, you're not over the mitzvah say, because there is no mitzvah say to put tzitzits on a beged of dal kanfus on Shabbos, because there can't be, because you would be over it's a daraisa of Shabbos to try to do it. Ve'eino lav rak is a d'Rabbanan. Therefore, to wear a beged of dal kanfus without tzitzits on Shabbos is only an issa d'Rabbanan. It's not an issa daraisa. Well, kach hutar but they covered abrius. And therefore, covered abrius trumps the issa d'Rabbanan, and you're allowed to wear the tzitzits outside in the karmelis, even though you're doing haitzah d'Rabbanan, and you're being over in issa d'Rabbanan that you're wearing a beged of dal kanfus without tzitzits. They are both pushed aside because of covered abrius. Vein tzarich lifshad hatalis. Avol b'rishus harabim. But if you are outside in a bona fide rishus harabim, 16 amas wide, Shishim Ribu, 600,000 people use it, right? Ocean Parkway, you're in a bona fide Rishus Harabim. So now it's like Tzad Daraisa, Shehu Min HaTorah, and to wear this beged of Dalet Kanfus with puzzle and tzitzits, now you're doing Tzad Daraisa, because the tzitzit strings are a masui, they're a burden. So that's like tzad daraisa. Oh, tzarech lapashtai. You have to take the talis off immediately. Bein betalis gadol, whether we're dealing with your talis gadol, or bein betalis cotton, or if you have to quickly take off your shirt and take off your talis cotton, you have no choice. Va'afilu im yishar ayman aram al yedei. Even if somehow you would have to stand naked in the street, you would be mechuyev to take it off. Yes, you're going to stand naked in the street before you can be over in the daraisa. Ein chachma, ve'ein tvuna, ve'ein eitza l'neged Hashem. She'ein kavod abrius doiche is a daraisa because they're b'chol gavni. Kavod abrius is not doiche, it is a daraisa. So here's the source for the concept that we've been talking about, which is that on Shabbos, to wear a beged of dal kanfus without kosher and tzitzits is only an issa d'Rabbanan, not an issa d'Oraisa. Ulakaman behilcha Shabbos, im Yirtzeh Hashem Yispayer, where we get to Hilcha Shabbos, Yirtzeh Hashem in good health, we will explain the yesh bachloikis in bizman hazeh yesh lanu din rishos harab moiloi. This is something we spoke about many times when we were learning Chelik Daled. It's questionable whether or not we really have a rishos harabim daraisa nowadays. V'nira, and it seems, says the Chavetz Chaim, dim hagedil hu shalem va'apsul hu rak ba'anaf. Now we're going back to the complications of the previous shiurim when we spoke about the psulim of tzitzis and of tzitzis strings. So if you remember, we said we had a machlokes, the Rashi, machlokes, Rashi, and the Ri, right? What happens if all of the strings of the tzitzits are cut off and you don't have kidei aniva in the strings, but the gedil is still intact? According to the Ri, that's good. Since we have kidei aniva in the gedil, we're still kosher. According to Rashi, you need kidei aniva in the strings. Says the Mishnah over here that machlokes has ramifications here as well, because he says like this: "V'niradim hagedil hu shalem." If the gedil is intact, so you have kidei aniva of all the tzitzis strings in the gedil, va'apsul hu rak be'anaf, and it's only the loose strings that are ripped off. Nucha l'tzaref lazeh das hari le'el damachshir. According to the Ri, those tzitzis are still kosher. So if you have on Shabbos that you're outside and you have a psul in the strings, but the gedil is still intact, then even if you're in a rishus harabim, you could still wear it, because according to the Ri, it's okay. Ve'in tzarich lepashtei tekef. It's also covered abrius and the Ri, so you don't have to quit right away, take off the talis rak yamar leilach lebeisai. Instead, you just run home and you take it off when you get home. He's cutting yud. The Mechaber said somebody was walking in a Carmelis and he realized that his talis is puzzle. Now the phraseology of the Mechaber is interesting. He says that the talis is puzzle. He doesn't say that the tzitzits are puzzle. He says the talis is puzzle. Very cute diak the Chavetz Chaim makes. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ritzoynoi loymar. See, whenever the Chavetz Chaim says Ritzoynoi loymar, he's telling you what the Mechaber wants to say. That means that the Mechaber is being medayik. The Chavetz Chaim is being medayik in something that the Mechaber wrote, and he's explaining to you, you might have missed this, but there's something funny here. And Ritzoynoi loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say with his funny wording, is XYZ. So it says over here in the Mishnah Berurah, Ritzoynoi loymar. What does this mean? Talis puzzle. Bein shenifsak loy gam keren atalis. Maybe the tzitzits didn't become puzzle. Maybe the beged became puzzle. How could that happen? Something happened, your talis really got caught in something, and one of the corners ripped off. And now it's not a beged of Daled Kanfus anymore. Now it's a beged of Gimel Kanfus. Now it's putter and tzitzits. And it's got tzitzit strings hanging on it. Now the tzitzit strings might be fine, but now the tzitzit strings are pointless, because it's not a beged of Daled Kanfus. Well, guess what? It's a masui. The tzitzit strings are a masui. So bein shenifsek loy gam keren atalis v'das b'shalosh, ubein shenifsek loy echad mitzitziyos of levad, or if the tzitzis became puzzle. Either way, you now are carrying a masui in a karmelis in a rishus d'Rabbanan. You're being over in Issa d'Rabbanan, but it's nidchem and they cover the bris. Va'afilu im haya kvar puzzle b'shas shegatza b'beisai. Even if you realize while you're walking in the karmelis that your talis was puzzle since this morning, and you just didn't chap. Since you're not shuldik, you didn't realize it when you put it on in the morning. We don't penalize you, and you're not mechuyev to take off the talis in the street. The gadol covered abrius. Even our talis gadol, where we don't wear it all day, we only wear it in shul. Mitzvah. So v'leka bizoi ba'asarasai, is there such a bizoyan? We don't wear a talis all day. So if somebody sees you walking in the street without a talis, is it such a bizoyan? So what's this big covered abrius? If you're walking in the street and you realize that your tzitzis are puzzle, why can't you take it off? What's this big covenant of Brias? Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're still not mechuyev to take it off. Very interesting reason why not. Gam kein ein tzarich la'asiroi. Why? Deloi polug rabbanon beitalis latalis. Once the Chazal said that you're not mechuyev to take your talis off because of covenant of Brias, it covers all talisim. However, Rabbi Kiva Eger is not happy with this kula. Okay, I'm going to stop over here for now because it's already a 45-minute share. So I'm going to stop over here. However, I may sit down tonight and record a second share so that we cover today's page. We're already behind because of Yom Tov. I'm really not interested in falling even more behind. I want to catch up. It's just proving difficult to catch up. But I certainly don't want to fall more behind. So therefore, I caution you, when you check later or you check tomorrow, look at the Simanim and the Seifim in the title of the share, because there may yet be another share posted sometime this evening. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Schus of limud HaTorah should be making on God's Klal Yisrael. Berurah should say, Yeshua's for us, Parnasset Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeichet to see the BS Girl Tzedek B'meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.